Locrian.
Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here. The internet's blah, 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 and it's time for a review of the new Locrian album, Return to Annihilation. These guys are a Chicago band, a three-piece, and for about 10 years now they've been toiling under the radar, making all kinds of experimental rock music, churning out numerous records, sometimes a few within the span of 1 year. And the music on these records is usually a twisted cauldron of black metal, post-rock, drone, noise, dark ambient music as well. The band really emphasizes texture, sound, dynamics, and intensity too over everything else. You know, things like a strong melody or accessibility. And the band makes this pretty mountainous music on their new album as well, on what at times feels like a shoestring budget. There is definitely a slightly lo-fi quality to the music on this album. There's a lot of ambient noise, room noise surrounding some of the instruments like the drums. The recording is a little rickety, it's a little loose, it's a little noisy, but the sounds are still very heavy, rich, and vivid. It's just a recording that's got some character to it, I would say. You know, it's got a lot of blemishes on it, I suppose, but the performances are there, the sounds are there. Now, similar to artists like Tim Hecker or Boards of Canada, for example, the music that Locrian makes is incredibly visual. It's cinematic, it's very thematic. There are actually some pretty strong themes on this album, I would say, of apocalypse, vastness, desolation. And they embrace these feelings with some really raw drums, some tattered, distorted keyboards, some heavy bass, and some very bouncy, echo-drenched guitars. Even though the elements that Locrian works with on this record are very simple, they do create some very strong moods with them, using a lot of repetition throughout these tracks to really create a place in my mind that I can sort of freely wander through as I'm listening to it. On some of the tracks on this record, it's not like the songs really have a beginning point and an end point per se. It's not like they have a strong progression. It's like they just are. They're static, they stay. There's a lot of stillness in these tracks. Like the track Exiting the Hall of Vapor and Light, which has these distorted keyboards, some wandering guitars, and a very patient beat. It is a very repetitive song, but it feels like the more the band repeats these ideas over and over and over, the more real and the more vivid this soundscape they're creating becomes, the more I feel as if I'm in it. It's almost as if I kind of want that repetition. I'm looking for it, because what Locrian is creating in this song, it's so evocative. However, sometimes the repetition sort of works against Locrian's favor, because the sounds that they're working with or the music that they're playing, it's really not that evocative, it's not that moving. Like the stumbling guitar leads throughout the track Two Moons, which I'm really sort of cold toward, or the song of Visitation from the Wrath of Heaven, which has this huge, monstrous ending which breaks in suddenly, reminds me of something Mogwai used to do on their older stuff. And I love the finish. The instrumentation's really thick, it's heavy, there's so much texture flying at me at once, it's overwhelming. But the span of 6 minutes in between this point and the intro, where the band is really repeating on this primal drum beat, these weird reversed melodies that are cycling over and over and over, I guess I'm not that enthralled with this interlude. The end is amazing, but the journey on the way there is just not that stellar. I just wish it were a little more engaging. Like the second half of this LP, actually. Like the title track on here, which is actually pretty multifaceted. It starts off with these just rich, twangy guitars that feel like I'm hearing a bit of a desert hymnal or something going on, especially with the vocals in the background. There's a drony interlude, a post-rock like build-up, and then this hellish black metal inspired downward spiral at the finish. It's a pretty intense friggin' ride, and the 15-minute closer is actually my favorite moment on here, maybe, with the acoustic guitar and the heavy dramatic bassy piano keys right at the start, and the song evolves into moments of noise, of drone, black metal. And I love how the band keeps their sound palette really similar from track to track to track, and even from genre shift to genre shift, making all of these various influences come together and feel sort of cohesive, as if they're meant to be together. Anyway, this closing track, as it just trudges on, it becomes this deafeningly apocalyptic dirge. It is the perfect closer for this thing, and really encapsulates the cover art that we have going on here. The lone shopping cart, empty parking lot, fog. What Locrian writes on this album melodically or chord-wise is definitely not as interesting as their sound play, and it's not as interesting as their very wide mix of influences, unfortunately, but still, it didn't make this album any less enjoyable for me. What did you think of it? Did you love it? Hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. I want to give a shout out to Chainsaws, which you might hear in the background, John Dankosky, the Hip Hop Heads Reddit, Jamie's World, and Chris H. Oh, and also The Straw. I forgot that in the last video. But if you don't understand that this is my review and this is my opinion, here is a straw. Only the strong subscribe. All mistakes were intentional. Anthony Fantano, Locrian, forever.